Hey everyone, welcome to the Fireside Chat. I'm Heather Jassy. I'm the Senior Vice President of Members and Community. Thanks for joining us. As I'm sure you've noticed, we've had some pretty major changes to the seller experience in the last week. We had changes to the shop homepage and pattern, which is a way to build an accompanying e-commerce site for your shop. So today we're really going to be focused on Shop Home. We know there have been a ton of questions about pattern on all our social channels and in the forums. We'll continue to answer those questions there, and in the meantime, I would ask everyone to read through the FAQs on the help page, post questions in the forums, but for today we're going to be focused on Shop Home. Let's see, so our guests today to discuss this are Sonia and Dilani. Welcome to the Fireside Chat. They work on building tools for Etsy sellers and manage the release of the new shop homepage. So thank you both for being here today.
Yeah, great to be here.
So for sellers who are new to the Fireside Chats, these are a way to connect with you. We take questions from across all of our channels and ask them to different admin who work here at Etsy so that you can have your questions answered by the people who design and work on our products. So let's start with you, Dilani. Can you tell people what you do at Etsy?
Yeah, so I'm a product manager in the seller services team. I work with my team to build features that help sellers tell their story better. And the whole goal is to help buyers feel more trustful and confident buying from our marketplace.
Cool. Sonia, can you tell people what you do at Etsy?
Sure. So I'm also a product manager in the seller services group. And my team focuses on products that really emphasize the human connection on Etsy, as well as tools that let sellers showcase their brands and tell their unique story.
Cool. Sonia, you've been at Etsy a long time. What drew you to work here?
So I joined Etsy in 2010, but I've been a buyer since the very early days. My background is actually originally in business, and I really wanted to do work that had a positive impact on independent and creative business owners. And over the last 6 years at Etsy, I've worked on numerous buyer-facing as well as seller-facing products.
Cool. Dilani, what drew you to work at Etsy?
Yeah, so I started shopping on Etsy as most people do, and just fell in love with all the unique things that you can buy here. And then when I looked into what it's like to work here, I met some Etsyans and was just blown away by how passionate everyone is. And after a little while of spending time with a few other people at Etsy, I just had no doubt that I wanted to join the team here and work on all the awesome products that get built.
Cool. So we recently had a fireside chat with Arpan, Director of Product at Etsy, and he shared some of the broader themes that the product team is keeping in mind this year when developing Etsy tools and functionality. He also wrote a really great blog post about that if anyone wants to read that. For folks who missed that, can you tell us a little bit about what's been on your minds as you think about the focus for the year, either of you?
Yeah, so we're actually really focusing on building tools that help sellers convey their personal brand identity on Etsy. For example, I was on the team that built the Shop Videos feature, which is a feature that allows sellers to upload videos to the About section of their shop. And this is a really great way for sellers to really tell their story to the buyer. And we know from research that buyers love to understand the inspiration and the story behind your shop and the items that they're buying. So that was one of the great features that we released in the last few months, and we've seen a lot of great usage already.
I love Sonia, anything to add?
Well, our team worked on the new shop homepage, so it was really an opportunity for us to create a connection between a buyer and a seller.
Cool. Yeah, I love some of the things that Arpan talked about. That I think that these things are so great because sellers really want a way to express their individual brand and tell the story of their business. And the good news is that's what buyers also want to see. They want to understand the person behind the product and the shop, and anything that sellers can do to sort of help buyers understand them increases their chance of sale. So we really feel like working on these things is a win-win for buyers and for sellers. So we have lots of seller questions, so we're going to dive in. Sonia, I have questions for you. Recently your team launched a new version of Shop Homepage. Tell us what's different now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched the new shop homepage, and our goal for the project was really to make the page more modern, mobile-friendly, and customizable. So we know that buyers come to Etsy to buy products from real people, and they're more likely to make a purchase when they know about the person and process behind an item. So our seller community creates this really amazing and inspirational content, and we wanted to bring it to the forefront and really surface it to our buyers. So the new shop page has all of this amazing content on one page, meaning the buyer can browse items, check out shop updates, watch an about video, see the local market, all without leaving the shop page.
Great. Okay. So, a lot of sellers have asked why we made this change, right? If they liked it the way it was.
Yeah. Well, there's really three key reasons. First and foremost, we want sellers to make more sales. We also want to establish trust in the marketplace. And we know what key pieces of information buyers look for before making a purchase online. We also know that a majority of our buyers are browsing shops on mobile devices, so on their phones or on their iPads, and it was really important for us to make sure they have a cohesive experience across any device that they might use. So in terms of the trust, the key pieces of information, we call these trust signals, and these are things like your branding, your location, number of sales, your average review rating, even your name. And previously, that information was really scattered and diluted, and buyers had a hard time finding it. And the new shop homepage surfaces this content really prominently and clearly to the buyer.
I feel like a theme of the last number of months between the changes to search and these sorts of changes are really showing buyers that there's a real person behind your shop and really taking all these things into account. Can you talk just a tiny bit, just elaborate just a little bit on the devices and mobile and just kind of explain why that's important, that there's a consistent experience?
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
buyers?
So we know that a vast majority of buyers are using mobile devices, and we see that number grow every year. We also know that buyers will frequently start their Etsy journey on, let's say, a mobile phone because they get a link from a friend or they click on something on Pinterest, but they'll go to their computer or their laptop to complete that purchase. So it's really important that the information and layout is consistent so they know where to find things and they feel trust in the experience.
Okay, great. Let's see, I have a question from Australia. Lisa in Australia voiced a question that we've seen before during bigger changes. There must be an opt-out button. Where is our freedom of choice?
Yeah, so I totally understand that, but I think in a marketplace like Etsy where there's a lot of shops and a buyer might interact with many shops during their journey, it's really important that they know where to find things, that they see consistent layouts in the shop design. So I think the new shop home, while it's not optional, it does have more opportunities for customization and for sellers. So you have 3 different branding options. You can decide between 3 or 4 featured listings. And then you have all of this optional content like shop updates, videos to really create the experience that you want.
So maybe you want buyers to know that they're in different shops, but not feel like they've gone to a different website, which is
so
a really
we want sellers
confusing
to have
experience.
creative control and make them stand out in the marketplace, but we want to make sure that the key pieces of these trust signals and the actual interaction with the page is consistent for each shop.
Cool. So can you give sellers a glimpse behind the scenes, like what went into this and how were sellers involved? Because I think, understandably, if you're not inside, it can feel like Etsy just decided to flip a switch one day and a thing happened. And I feel like this in particular was a very long and well thought out, well-researched process. So if you could just explain everything that went into that would be great.
So we started this project actually last summer, and we start with a huge amount of research and data on buyer behavior. So what buyers do before they get to a shop, what they do when they land on a shop, what key pieces of information they're looking for in the shop. We then conduct in-depth research sessions with buyers as well as sellers to get feedback on various design concepts. And once we have a product built, we launched a prototype with over 500 sellers around the world. And for numerous months leading up to the launch, we made changes based on those sellers' feedback. So it was very much a collaborative experience over the last couple of months, and we really couldn't have done it without our engaged seller community.
So you mentioned the prototype team with 500 sellers. For people who are unfamiliar, could you explain how prototypes work and how you work with them?
Yeah, so prototypes are really important for product development here at Etsy, and it's an opportunity for a seller to opt in to use a product and give us feedback before we launch it to the public.
Cool. For those of you who would love more information on our product development process, there was a really great podcast that we did on that, so we could share the link for you so that you could check it out because it's really interesting. Let's see. So here's a question from Mary in the US. I'd be curious to know exactly what data went into the determination that buyers love seeing larger pictures. I believe that buyers probably do love seeing larger pictures of items they're considering purchasing. However, I also believe they would like to see more items before narrowing that down. So how did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that design decision was largely based on qualitative feedback. So we ran research sessions with existing as well as prospective shoppers, meaning we talked to folks that are really familiar with the classic shop design, as well as people that had never seen Etsy before. And in addition to various research techniques, we did side-by-side comparisons, and we saw consistently that buyers preferred to see larger product photos over smaller product photos.
So can you explain what a side-by-side comparison is?
Yeah, so that's
I'm assuming it means they're
yeah,
side-by-side.
it's pretty
and
literal.
okay.
So we show two design ideas, and we ask them to talk through what they like, what they don't like in each of them, and we saw consistently across the board that buyers would note in all the designs that they liked seeing the bigger photos. And I just want to note that the new shop home design does surface the same amount of products. So it's still 24 items per page. They're just a little bit bigger now.
It just may feel like less because
because there's 3 across on computers.
Okay, cool. So Dilani, I have some questions for you. So tell us a little bit about your role in the launch of the shop homepage.
Yeah, so my team and I worked on revamping the shop policy sections. And I worked with Sonia and her team pretty closely to make sure that this shop policies feature got built into the new shop home design so that sellers could have access to it at the same time, both features at the same time. We also took part in this prototype that Sonia was talking about, so we were able to rigorously test both features at the same time and make sure we ironed out all the kinks before we released.
So I have a seller question here. It's a question from Chelsea of Lost Coast Studio in British Columbia. And we heard this from some other sellers as well. Will using our own policies instead of the new generic ones affect our placement in search? A lot of people were concerned about this. Can you speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question and one that we saw come up quite often. So if you've written your own policies, you already get a boost in search. If you adopt the templated policies, you will get an additional boost. So you will get more of a boost than if you use the freeform policies. However, I think it's really important to emphasize that policies is one of the many, many things that affect your search placement. So one of the most important things that you can do for your shop in terms of search is have really effective tags and titles. Some other things that go into search placement include things like your review score and having a completed about section. So it's important to remember that there's a multitude of things that go into search, and policies is one of them.
Yeah. We did a fireside chat with a product manager here at Etsy who worked on search, and we'll link to that in the description if you want more information. There's also a really great article. It's really transparent about how we think about search. And like you said, everything is one factor out of many, many, many things. So if people choose not to do a particular thing, there's no like silver bullet.
Exactly.
There are a lot of things that we consider. So why did your team think it would be beneficial to sellers to work on policies?
Yeah, so we know that policies are really important to the success of businesses on Etsy. previously policies were totally freeform, which meant some sellers were writing a lot of detail, but perhaps not targeted at the questions that buyers really wanted to know, while other sellers were not writing anything at all. And we know that having really clear, concise policies provides a better buyer experience and a better seller experience, because it sets expectations for buyers, but it can also protect sellers.
So I remember hearing from you that part of the process around this was doing research with buyers to sort of see what they responded to when they read through shop policies, and that they found it really difficult to read through really long policies. And so like with these policies, we really honed in on the ones that people really like gravitated toward, that made it easier for them to shop.
Absolutely. We went with the template for a very specific reason, and it was all based on a lot of research. So we saw that buyers were having a really hard time reading through these really long policies, and they were actually looking for a very few specific pieces of information. But they were having a hard time finding it among all the different formats that sellers put their policies in. But the really key learning that we took away from our research was that buyers want to find this information really quickly. And the standardization of policies really helps buyers do that. And another thing that we hope the template will achieve is make it, reduce the number of cases that buyers may file against sellers, because now they have more clarity. And finally, I think another really important piece that the template achieves is the ability for us to translate it consistently across a number of languages, so that, being a global marketplace, your buyers worldwide can now understand your policies and feel more confident buying from you.
Yeah, I know you mentioned cases, and I think one of the challenges is that when shops don't have cases, I think buyers are more likely to file cases because they don't have any expectations of when they're supposed to receive this thing. But from our perspective, it also makes it harder to defend sellers when there's a case filed against them, because there's no sort of document of what they promised to the buyer, and it just makes it really challenging. So if it's all set out there very concretely, it's much easier on both sides. Yeah. So you did some pretty extensive research with sellers as well. What did that look like?
So it was very similar for buyers and sellers. We usually start with large-scale surveys that help us get a lot of buyer input. So we, for both buyers and sellers, at the early stages, it's helpful to just talk to a lot of different wide range of buyers and sellers and get their input. And what we use that information is, we use that information to refine the early designs and to tweak a lot of our ideas and really get things in better shape from our very early ideas. And then we take that and do research in front of sellers who we bring in. So we then use that to really tweak and get everything spot on. For sellers, because we know that this is such an important change, we also took part in this 500 seller prototype group to really make sure we took in feedback and understood what was important for sellers. We got a lot of feedback around features and language, and we incorporated all of that into the final design. We also actually worked very closely with our policy and legal teams, because we wanted to make sure we were directing sellers in the right direction in a legal sense. We did also talk to external counsel for very, very specific things that we wanted to get right. One example is, we know that in the EU there are consumer protection laws that are very strict, and we took care to design the policies in a way that allows sellers to be compliant with those.
Okay. So, just to everyone who's had a lot of feedback about this, we're of course, we're paying really close attention to the feedback in the forums and our social channels, and escalating these to the team, as well as the email sent to our support team. we saw a lot of requests from sellers for improvements and updates to these new releases, both for the policy template and Shop Home. And I think those of you who've been at Etsy for a long time know that we release things and then we constantly make improvements and changes in response to what customers want. So I have another question for you about this. Serena Avo Plesiosor, I hope I'm saying it right, Serena Plesiosor in the US said, are you open to making revisions to this design based on user feedback and usability testing in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we both just want to emphasize what you said, which is the launch of these products is really just the beginning of this, and we're going to be iterating and making improvements based on seller feedback, as well as based on purchasing and buyer behavior, which is something that we monitor really closely when we make big changes like this. So based on some seller feedback we've received, we're currently working on improvements to the Rearrange Your Shop tool to make it much easier for sellers with large quantities of listings to move items between pages. So we have a lot of really fun new features coming soon.
Great. And we've already made some updates, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely the same thing with policies. We've definitely seen a lot of really good usage of the feature already between amongst existing and new sellers. But it's just the start, and we're really paying attention to feedback and iterating. We've already made some changes, as you mentioned. One of those changes, for example, was for digital sellers. We heard from them that the shipping section didn't make a ton of sense if you only sell digital items.
Makes sense, yeah.
And so we're like, makes sense. So let's make an adjustment that allows that makes the shipping section hidden for those items. We also added an extra section for German sellers because we heard that they had to comply with some very specific laws within Germany. And with both Shop Home and policies, I think we have a lot of changes in the works, so just stay tuned.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Everyone, thank you for joining us today. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to direct them to our support team. I do also want to give you a verbal disclaimer that anything discussed in this video is true as of today, but as we know, things change, so be sure to check the date in the future. Thanks so much. Have a great week.